serve for the planning committee, and I know you're a member. We both are members, so it is at 11. Krista, can you do a sound check, please?
Can you hear me?
Oh God, yes.
Loud and clear.
I don't know what's going on with my mic.
Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone, and I would like to call our special meeting to order for February 24th, 2022. We have a land acknowledgement. I'd like to recognize that the Ottawa is located on unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe host nation. The people of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe nation has lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The Ottawa Police Service Board honors the peoples and the land of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. Today, Ottawa is home to approximately 40,000 First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. Ottawa Indigenous community is diverse, representing many nation, language, and customs. The Ottawa Police Service Board honors all First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people and their valuable past and present contribution to this land. We are currently broadcasting on Zoom and live streaming on YouTube. There was a scheduling conflict with an account we usually stream on today, and we are streaming on Council French channel. Given this meeting has been held electronically, I want to caution that there is a possibility of technical difficulties. Should we receive any disruption, I would ask that everyone remain patient as we work to fix the issue and resume the meeting as soon as possible. Before moving to the confirmation of the agenda, I would like to know that prior to this public meeting, the board met in camera to discuss two labor relations matter and personal matter. This included a discussion on the ongoing recruitment of the third deputy chief, which the board had previously announced in early January. In light of the recent changes to the leadership of the police service, and the board will be placing the deputy recruitment on hold. The board would like to ensure it has permanent chief of police in place first. Before we go to the deputy chief process, we would like to make sure we have permanent chief. Our city remain in a state of emergency, and the service is still engaged in operations detail of the unlawful protest. The board will be receiving a 7-member in coming weeks. The next member will be from City Council and will be brief on the board's previously approved 2022 work plan and outstanding matters. I know OPS members and the public and our community partner are anxious to hear more about the chief recruitment. The board needs a bit more time to develop a well thought out, community-minded process. We hope to make an announcement before our March meeting to update the public on our strategy. Lastly, I know there are some members of the community who are looking for an opportunity to speak and raise their comment and concern about what transpired these past few weeks in terms of response to the unlawful protest. I want to assure the community that I have reached out to my downtown councillor colleague, and I want to thank Councillor Leeper for his help, most impacted by this protest, to offer assistance in organizing meaningful dialogue with impact communities. So we reach out to Councillor McKinney, Fleury, Rothland King, Leeper to work together and broad community meeting. I recognize this is an important part of the healing process. So we left it with the hand of the downtown councillor to tell us what would they like us to do. We heard they would like to see public health involvement as well, not just police. So we are still made ourselves available to work with our colleague. We're just waiting to tell us what they would like us to do, and then we can come back together as a team and work with our service. I recognize, I do recognize this is a very important part of the healing process. I just need to remind the public that we are remain in a state of emergency, and the police are still focused on ensuring demonstrators do not return. And folks, for those who were looking for, and they signed up for the meeting of February 28th, the one we canceled, there was no material from the service. So even for those people who sign up to speak on certain items, those items, they were not available for us because in the last month, we were in a state of emergency, and our staff, our OPS service, they were fully engaged in what's taking place. So we are remain committed to a public engagement. We like to hear from the public. This is part of healing for all of us. We all have questions. And we heard under the Emergency Act, then it's going to be full inquiry. Then our council colleague, they have inquiry. And today I'm hoping also we have what you call a lesson learned from OPS, and all these will work together with the inquiry. So to the public who's listening to us, we're not avoiding hearing from you. We just want to first ourselves to be able to engage ourselves, because we have 3 new board members right now, and we are looking for the 7th member. So please be patient, and we will want to hear from you. Thank you. Do we need roll call, Madam Executive Director?
No, we don't typically do a roll call. You can go ahead.
Okay, so I see everybody on the screen, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Confirmation of the agenda that the Ottawa Police Service Board confirmed agenda of 24 February 2022 meeting. Is the agenda confirmed?
Confirmed.
Thank you. Declaration of interest. Are there any declaration of interest? See none. Thank you. Item of business. The first item is an update on police operations to remove the unlawful protester. The interim is Chief Bell. I will turn it to you for a briefing, but before I turn to you, I just want the board to remember interim chief will be with us till maximum 10:15, but the other 2 deputy will stay with us. Is that correct? Because you have another meeting.
I do have another meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can be here till 10:30, and then I have to depart.
Okay, so why don't we turn it for you, and please introduce your deputies to us, because some of us know, some of them don't. Please take a minute to introduce them.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, and good morning, members of the board. I'd first like to start off by thanking the chair for calling this special board meeting, and thank the members of the board for their support over the last several days as we've embarked on removing the unlawful demonstrations from our streets. We've worked together over the last number of days to make sure that we've kept the public informed, the board informed, and the council informed about the progress of demobilizing and removing these unlawful demonstrations. Today, I'm here with CAO Blair Dunker, Acting Deputy Chief Trish Ferguson, and Acting Deputy Chief Paul Burnett, and we will be providing you an update on the operations that we've embarked on and continue to remove the unlawful protests from the streets, as well as an update on our plans for the coming weekend. I know there's been a lot of information around this on the media and in social media. So today we want to walk you through some of the developments of the execution of our operational plan, review some of the key performance and financial metrics that we've gathered to date, and discuss our plans for the coming weekend and beyond that. We've had a lot of success, but this operation isn't over. Not everything is completed yet. As you'll hear, we continue to have resources in place to prevent unlawful protests from returning this coming weekend and moving ahead. Checkpoints and security measures will remain, and those without a lawful reason to return to the area still may be subject to arrest. Hannah, if you could load up the slides, please. Hannah, are you able to load the slides up? Thank you very much. Thank you. So before we start, I want to once again thank the residents of Ottawa, the people who in the downtown core and all of the police members, both from the Ottawa Police Service and from across Canada, who came to our city to assist us when we needed them most to remove the unlawful demonstration. The cooperation and partnerships we've seen from every level of government, all of our city services, and from partners across the country has been unparalleled and incredibly important to the success that we've seen to date. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Chief Ferguson to start to begin our update.
Thank you, Chief, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to provide you with this update. Hannah, if you could go to the first slide, please. So I'll begin by saying the operation plan was led by the OPS and supported by the RCMP, the OPP, and municipal services from across Canada. The plan development was coordinated through the Integrated Command Center. The plan objective was and continues to be return to a state of normalcy for impacted businesses and residents. The plan was designed in a methodical and deliberate way and sought to maintain safety for all involved. There were multiple key components considered, including communications, demonstrator management, traffic and perimeter control, enforcement and arrest, and intelligence and investigation. All components of the plan were created in consideration of one another and accounted for an array of outcomes and timelines. As you can imagine, this extensive plan required additional resources with differing degrees of expertise to design and execute. It is due to the incredible efforts of our members and of our partner agencies that we've been so successful. The execution of the plan began in the middle of last week, and it was largely executed over the weekend, but continues to be in play today. Efforts will continue for as long as required to ensure that the community and businesses can return to a state of normalcy. Next slide, please. In a calculated manner, we issued repeated warnings, and this was done in person with leaflets, through social media, and news releases and news conferences. After multiple warnings and requests to leave over a period of days, unlawful protesters continued to create lawlessness in our streets. Despite repeated warnings to leave, many individuals had no intentions of doing so until police personnel arrived to carry out a methodical, safe, and deliberate operational plan. Last Thursday was the marked operational launch phase. This phase saw continued efforts to warn protesters to leave, with the consequences made clear for not doing so, as well as a creation of a secure area, or checkpoints as you've seen, and the gradual positioning of resources. The transition to what we call actions on phase began last Friday, with protester clearing activities beginning from the east and moving westwards through the day. Multiple arrests were made and several vehicles were seized. At nightfall, forward-moving operations were paused to hold gained ground at Mackenzie in order to secure and clear the area of vehicles and debris. At this time, the city services began cleaning and clearing of the streets to allow for a return to citizens and businesses. Throughout this phase, police personnel faced significant assaultive behavior, abuse, and vitriol. They achieved operational objectives in spite of this. Officers specially trained in demonstrations performed specific and precise public order unit techniques to address this and diffuse the situation. The use of the mounted unit was among them. Next slide, please. On Saturday morning, actions on operations continued. In direct response to the assaultive behavior and aggression level of the protesters the day prior, the decision was made to take additional safety precautions for our officers. As such, officers donned head, eye, and ear protection on Saturday, and why you saw batons were displayed prominently. We advised unlawful protesters of this in our media and social media messaging. Throughout the day, progress was made in clearing the city streets from east to west. At no point was gained ground given up to protesters, with fencing and additional barricades installed as our officers progressed. Protesters used flares and smoke bombs at various points throughout the day in an effort to destabilize the operation. Nonetheless, multiple arrests were made through Saturday. Into the evening, a crowd gathered on Bank Street at Queen and demonstrated behavior ranging from disturbing to assaultive to aggression with attempts to disarm police. It was during this time that the anti-riot weapon known as the Arwin was deployed. The final few protesters in the downtown core dispersed by midnight, after a fence was put in place. At this time, vehicle removal and street cleaning activities recommenced. Next slide, please, Hannah. As we've said on numerous occasions, our primary objective through this operation has been to return impacted residents and businesses to a state of normalcy. This required a police-maintained secure area and attention to who was permitted to enter that area. This area has continued to shrink, and officers now remain in a position of observation. A strong elevated police presence will remain in place for as long as is required and can be increased when needed. The OPS has maintained regular direct contact with BIAs and residents to address any concerns they have as we continue remediation efforts. I'd like to acknowledge that police members achieved their operational objectives in spite of long hours, cold temperatures, and with very little rest. Personnel showed courage, resilience, and professionalism, and we should all be proud of them. This was an all-of-Canada effort. The hundreds who participated in weekend operations represented the OPP, the RCMP, the Sûreté du Québec, and services from Ottawa, Hamilton, Belleville, London, Peel Region, Waterloo, Toronto, Halton, York, Durham, Brantford, St. Thomas, Kingston, Cornwall, Guelph, Sudbury, Gatineau, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Saskatoon, and Regina. Members were professional, trained, and prepared for this scenario, and they showed the vital role police have in maintaining a lawful society. We are grateful to them and proud to work alongside them. I will now turn it over to Acting Deputy Chief Paul Burnett.
Thank you, Trish, and good morning, everyone. This operation is ongoing. Investigations continue and will for the foreseeable future. It is likely that additional charges will be laid and arrests made, so numbers will continue to fluctuate. The unlawful protest has had an overwhelming impact on residents of our downtown core, but we know the effects of this event have been felt by residents across the city, from Cumberland to West Carleton. As of February 21st, our police service has responded to more than 2,100 protest-related calls for service. This has resulted in over 400 criminal investigations, including 15 hate and bias-motivated incidents. Calls to our communications center was up by 400%, most of the increase attributed to fake calls and people hoping to jam our lines. This was dangerous and likely criminal and irresponsible. To address unlawful behavior and restore public order, nearly 200 people have been arrested and more than 120 charged so far. This number will continue to grow. Combined, bylaw and Ottawa Police Service issued more than 4,200 tickets for various documents and moving violations under the HTA and bylaw infractions related to parking and noise. This effort also included support of the Ministry of Transportation. While managing one of the largest and most complex demonstrations in our country's history, police officers continue to respond to emergencies, investigate crimes, and hold offenders accountable across the city. In total, there were more than 23,000 requests for service during this same period, with 14,000 calls requiring an on-scene police response. This incident included homicide, shootings, and street violence, road safety issues, fatal collisions, assaults, and sexual assaults. At times, the OPS Communications Center and Police Reporting Unit experienced a 400% increase in calls daily, where the majority of these contexts were abusive in nature. I'll turn it back over to you, DC Ferguson.
Thank you. Next slide, please, Hannah. So for this coming weekend, we want to assure residents and businesses that we will maintain a strong and consistent presence in the downtown core. As we have been to date, we will be deliberate and methodical in everything we do. This will be done as part of our overall efforts to support our downtown community members and local businesses as they reopen. We will also ensure that the unlawful protest is not given a chance to return, and to do so, we'll be taking the following actions. There'll be continued expansion of police presence, vehicle and foot patrols, and overall level of vigilance. There remains a robust integrated police presence in the downtown core, and static positions are in place, supported by outer observation points, QRTs, which are quick response officers, and mobile response. Traffic services continue to engage in proactive enforcement activities. In terms of additional preventative efforts, individuals who have attempted to come to Ottawa for related demonstration purposes have been identified and spoken to and told to leave, with documented warning for charges should they return. Next slide, please. When we refer to the footprint, as we have throughout this situation, we're referring to the affected area. Initially, that meant the area impacted by demonstrators and trucks, but as this has evolved to mean the secured area established and maintained by police. With the retraction of the Emergencies Act yesterday, this footprint will continue to be monitored with officers in key positions in the area between Bronson, Laurier, the Canal, and Wellington. We anticipate that this area will shrink over time as the situation evolves, but we will not reduce the footprint prematurely. Any changes to the footprint will be communicated to the community through all available channels, including social media, city councillors, and BIAs. Next slide, please. We do wish to remind the public of some general reminders as the weekend approaches, and in the event of an emergency, residents and businesses are asked to call 911. Should one wish to communicate with police in a non-emergency situation, they're asked to call 613-236-1222. And should one wish to report a bylaw infraction, they should contact bylaw services directly. Thank you. And back to next slide, please. Over to DC Burnett.
As there has been quite a bit of interest in communication techniques used during operations, I wanted to speak to this briefly. Techniques and tactics used were done in lockstep with the incident commander and based on recommendations that have come from previous inquiries, inquests, and reviews. The objective of our police liaison team and communication team was to make sure that the citizens and demonstrators had the latest information upon which they could make informed decisions. This was achieved in a few different ways. First, the PLT was placed on the ground and were responsible for maintaining a line of communication with demonstrators. This resulted in many successes and negotiations. Second, communication and media personnel were embedded in the incident command center, allowing for real-time scanning of inputs, including news media, upon which they crafted their messaging. This ensured that explanation of operations and police tactics could be provided in real time. It also ensured that any misinformation was identified and addressed as soon as possible. I'll turn it over to CAO Dunker. Thank you.
Hi there.
Next slide, please.
So on the financial front, we continue to track all costs, and we will be seeking full reimbursement from the federal government. It's important to note that the figures are estimates as we continue to receive and verify costs daily. This morning, I reviewed the estimates, and they are now tracking at just over 31 million. And as you've heard, the operation is ongoing, and our partner police services continue to be deployed. And as we look to future events and protests and demonstrations, we will need to plan for increasing policing costs. I think it's back to the chief now.
Yep, thank you very much, Blair, as Trish and Paul. So Chair, you've got what we believe is a comprehensive overview of what's occurred over the past number of days and what will occur into the weekend. As we look forward, I do want to advise the board of some important staffing changes that we've made effective this week. Deputy Chief Trish Ferguson will take on the role of Intelligence, Information, and Investigations Command. And Acting Deputy Chief Paul Burnett has been assigned to the Community Policing Command. Inspector Francois Daou will be assigned starting as of tomorrow to the executive officer. These changes are going to provide some stability in the command structure of our service as we move ahead. These changes will also ensure that we can continue to provide safety to those in the downtown core, proceed with the efforts of community healing and outreach, review how we hold protests, and review how we responded to this protest. As the demands of the unlawful demonstration dissipate, we all work towards a more normalized state. I want to reassure you that the OPS has started to resume its focus on our business operations. We've initiated the steps to review, assess, and recalibrate our strategic operational plan that we set in January of this year. Given the unprecedented events, it'll be critical that we engage in discussions with the board, specifically related to the board's strategic planning process, as well as potential impacts that the unlawful demonstration may have had on our priorities and commitments that were set. There's significant work ahead of us, and this work will continue to ensure everyone feels safe in our community. This work will be done around the core principles of equity, diversity, and inclusion, building trust with everyone in our community, collaborating and co-partnering with the community to provide the level and duty of care that our citizens expect from their police service. So, and if you can go to the next slide, this will conclude our update, and we'd be happy to take any questions, Mr.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chief, and thank you, DC Burnett and Ferguson, for your presentation. We really appreciate it. Before I proceed, I would like to ask, with the board permission, to have Madame Valiquette resume acting vice chair for this item, as I would like to. Traditionally, the chair doesn't move motion, but this motion is very important. I move it myself as the chair, and I would like to have Madame Valiquette acting as a vice chair, so I can introduce my motion. But before, if that's okay with the board, just so I can, thank you. So first of all, thank you, interim chief and deputies. Throughout the unlawful protest, the service, the board, and the city council have been receiving many questions, comment, and concern from the public and our stakeholders around various aspects of the response. There will be inquiries around all elements of this operation.
Sorry, Chair, can this be displayed on the screen so that we can read it for everyone?
I believe staff has the motion, but this is my speaker note. I don't have my speaker. My speaker note's not displayed, but you can display the motion, Hannah, if you like. So there will be inquiries around all elements of this operation. However, they will take time. I think there is a benefit in having after-action report conclude in the short term, so we can all begin to better understand what happened and why. This report can help feed into any other inquiries. As we all know, and I said it earlier, the city already have in place inquiries going to happen, and also the federal government, my understanding, they will have to have inquiry after the declaring the state of emergency. Hannah, can you put my motion on the screen? Here you go. Here's my motion, member, but I will read it for the benefit of the people on the YouTube. Whereas the unlawful protest that began on January 28, 2022, caused significant undue hardship to the residents and businesses in the downtown core and across the city. And whereas there are many community concern and question about the initial police operation and response, and where the response to remove the unlawful protest requires significant support of police from across Canada, and whereas the police response also involve the assistance of the federal, provincial, and municipal level of government. And whereas the community, Ottawa City Council, the Ottawa Police Service Board, and the Ottawa Police Service wish to learn from this crisis so that further response can be more effective and timely. Be it resolved that the board direct the executive director of the board to work with the City of Ottawa procurement office to identify an independent reviewer who is able to assist the overall response, including but not limited to incident command structures, community engagement, board role and responsibilities, intelligence gathering and analysis, operational approaches, framework for planning, communications, operational readiness, partnership with police, law enforcement, intelligence agency, and emergency services, resources and resource management and enforcement strategy. Be it further resolved that the executive director bring forward a report to the board for approval of the independent review and framework of the review, including cooperation with other ongoing reviews to the March meeting of the board, and that review be completed in no later than 120 days after the approval of the contact. So we're not improving that today. We're just giving direction today to the executive director to work with the city procurement officer and to be able to secure this. So if you like to talk about this motion now, or we can just go to public delegation. I put it on the floor so we have time to digest it. And we're going to go to the board member asking question first to the operation, and then we'll go to our city councilor colleague. So I see member Leeper have his hand up. Member Leeper, please proceed.
Thank you very much. And first, obviously, to police, thank you very much for the actions that you undertook over the weekend. There is a palpable sense of relief in the downtown, in Centertown. That relief extends through Kitchissippi Ward, I know into Capitol Ward, and right across the city where so many have been affected by what's going on. There are obviously a lot of questions to answer about how the entire event transpired, but for your actions over the weekend to clear these protesters out and to keep them out over the past several days, thank you very, very much. I'll leave my questions sort of specifics today, because I know we're going to be moving into larger inquiries and the questions of how this was allowed to transpire, et cetera, for another day. With respect, I want to get caught up on the state of emergency that was declared by the federal government, the provincial government. The Emergency Act orders, I understand, have been rescinded. What authorities are no longer available to you in terms of being able to enforce the law? Chief Bell, I think you mentioned that perhaps it was DC Ferguson, that people who go into the prohibited zone are still subject to arrest. Do you still have the power to do that with the Emergency Act orders rescinded?
So first of all, thank you, Councillor Leeper, for recognizing the enormous effort of our members and other police services and partners across the country. I really do appreciate that, and absolutely agree with you that there is, between the inquiries and the reviews of what's going to happen, we will have lessons learned. We will identify areas where we can improve. And I can tell you this organization, and I think every police organization across the country, is open to that, to make sure that this situation is never repeated again. In terms of the Emergency Act, I was regularly, when I spoke with people, when I spoke to the media, I identified that the acts from the three levels of government were extremely beneficial to us in order to be able to manage the situation as we were in it. I still maintain that. Between the injunction, the private injunction, the injunction by the city, the emergency acts and legislation by the province, and the emergency act and legislation by the federal government were extremely beneficial and supportive of us to get to where we are today. The removal yesterday of that act created initially some dialogue and concern for us in terms how we would manage the situation through the weekend. We were able with our RCMP and OPP partners to really pick apart what are our common law abilities, what are our abilities under the HTA and under the Provincial Act that remain, and able to create a situation where we're very confident and comfortable with our ability to manage the situation into the weekend. One of the main areas where we worked with our partners, particularly the RCMP under the Emergency Act legislation, was around financial consequence and financial investigations for people who were involved in the demonstration. One of the great tools in it was if you were on our streets, parked and engaged in the unlawful demonstration, your accounts could be frozen. So somebody from another part of the country who would have a partner or spouse go to try and access money couldn't actually get that money out. That was beneficial to us to be able to encourage people to make the right decision, disengage from the unlawful protest, and leave. Because we don't have people on our streets anymore, I believe it was determined that that wasn't a mechanism that we needed to use at this point. But what I can tell you is there are still financial investigations that will go on that were initiated under the Emergency Act that will be able to be continued, that we are continuing to follow up on. So I hope that answers your question.
Partially, I am still wondering about the defensibility of the perimeter. If I want to go to the corner of Bank and Wellington this afternoon, under what legal authority can you prevent me from doing so?
So from as a pedestrian, we would not interfere with you from going into that area until you began to block a roadway, engaged in some illegal activity that was not allowed. So there is still the ability for us to be able to manage unlawful activities within that areas from a pedestrian perspective. As it relates to vehicles, we still have ability under the Highway Traffic Act. We still have ability under our common law abilities and responsibilities, as well as through work with our city partners to identify bylaw restrictions or road restrictions that they would like to see imposed. So we are absolutely able to manage and limit vehicular traffic in that area. And we will continue with our checkpoints. We will continue to monitor pedestrian traffic in that area and ensure that anyone that does go down to the core is not engaged in any illegal activity.
Okay. And with respect to the other officers or our partner agencies, Waterloo, et cetera, I think I had heard over the course of the last couple of weeks that the Emergency Act would, allow us to use those officers without their having to be sworn in Ottawa. Yesterday afternoon, I was looking at Waterloo officers performing duties on the streets. Do they have the same powers today as they did prior to the rescinding of the orders?
Yeah, absolutely. We continue. So there's been an amazing commitment from all of our partners, and any opportunity I have to speak and thank them, I will. So I will do it again. Policing from coast to coast contributed to making our streets safe. And I think every resident of Ottawa should be very grateful for that. We have ongoing commitments from the RCMP and the OPP. They will be on the ground with us till this is finished, done, packed up. There is nothing left of it. We also have commitments from other municipal police agencies, particularly as it relates to public order capacities. And the ability for them to operate in our city is maintained and is lawful even without the existence of the Emergency Act.
Okay, that's reassuring. What is the most recent intelligence with respect to those rural encampments about which many of us are concerned?
Absolutely, and I share your concern. What I can tell you is we do have active intelligence investigations that are monitoring all of those activities. We will know when people would leave from those areas and do have a plan and response in place to ensure that they are appropriately, lawfully dealt with, and that they are not able to get into our downtown core to set up again.
Are those growing or diminishing?
We continue to get intelligence around them. Our belief is that, similar to other weekends, they may grow over the weekend. We will continue to monitor that. But what I can tell you is we absolutely have a response plan in place to manage the numbers that could or would come to be engaged in this, to make sure that what happened 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago now, I guess, doesn't occur again.
Okay. Chair, I have 3 more questions. I'm not sure what the rules are of Police Services Board with respect to speaking length.
As long as we are limited on time. So please, if you can be brief, we need to go to the board first before we go to our colleague, and there's a number of our council colleague in waiting, please. Go ahead. Okay,
so I have 2 more questions, and I know my other questions will probably be asked. One of them is with respect to the Arwen device weapon. I'm sorry, I've been reading about that for a couple of days now. What is that exactly? What did the discharge of that weapon entail?
So I am going to turn that over, and I see him going to his mute already, to our resident expert, Acting Deputy Paul Burnett, who is very familiar with that and will explain what it is.
Thank you. So basically, the Arwen is a extended range baton. It does shoot out a projectile, which is the equivalent of, say, being hit with a fastball baseball. So it allows officers to use that extended range weapon for someone at distance to deter any type of aggressive behavior. And that's the basic premise behind that.
Okay, thank you. So I'll ask my larger question, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues. It's actually for the mover of for Chair yourself. You've moved a motion to do an inquiry. One of the aspects of this occupation about which the residents of Ottawa really want to understand is the widespread assertion that police were somehow complicit in the early days of the occupation, that the choice not to enforce or to take a lighter approach to the presence of occupiers on the ground was the result of sympathy within the ranks, for example. It's critical that we address that. Chair, is your inquiry or is your review that you're proposing one of the paths to be able to explore that question head on and in depth?
That's my attention. If you like to add it as a friendly amendment, to be clear, but I mean, we're talking about all the above, and you don't want me to read them again, but take your time, review the motion. If you like to add a friendly amendment toward the end, we can discuss it and then. Right now, let's focus on the question, and then we'll go to the next one. I see.
Thank you.
Chief, you have your hand up. Can we wait till after?
Yeah,
okay.
For sure.
Thank you, Member Leeper. Oh, sorry, I lost my list. Hold on. I think, Daljit Nerman, Member Nerman, you're next. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, I wish to thank Interim Chief Bell, your entire command team, all OPS officers from OPP, RCMP, and other municipal forces across our country, our partners at City of Ottawa and other stakeholders in this hour of need. They have really stood up, and I thanks once again to everyone. Chief, I have a few questions and would request your enlightenment on that. So first is Justin Ling, who is a freelance investigative journalist, tweeted on February 19th, and I quote, "A source in the emergency response team told me that the Ottawa Police planned, then canceled at least one operation after discovering details may have been leaked to the occupiers," end quote. Chief, have you or your team been able to view this tweet and confirms its validity?
So thank you for the question, Member Nerman. We're not going to get into operational details in today's discussion. The importance of us engaging fulsomely in the review so we can look at all of the steps that occurred to the demonstrators attending Ottawa, to them setting up within our streets, and then the actions we took subsequently to them being removed will all be part of that review. And I think it's very important that that review is done and supported by us with information we provide in an absolutely comprehensive way so that we can look at the totality of the picture, learn from it, and improve our operations along that. So while I acknowledge it's an extremely important question and one that I look forward to providing information around, I think it needs to be within the body of the review, but that would be the most responsible place to dig into all of the operational matters around this.
Thank you, Chief. As I understand, it's quite reasonable, and I will just briefly touch on that. That in case you do a full review, because this is a serious act of omission and commission, I am sure full investigation will be initiated to this and any other aspects leading to this.
So what I can let you know is there are already ongoing internal reviews that are being conducted around potential conduct of members that we take very seriously. Those will be investigated and reported on as those investigations progress. But I've said it before and I'll say it again, there can be no complicity of any members of our police service to the illegal occupation, and we will investigate them and follow up on them as proportionately and aggressively as we can, because there is no room for it.
Thank you, Chief. My next is the OPS formed an integrated command team or incident command team with OPP and RCMP. Though OPS was the lead force and you have done an amazing job, can you please advise the board what role was played by OPP and RCMP in managing this occupation?
So thank you for the question. I'm actually going to turn that over to Deputy Chief Ferguson to comment.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Member Nerman, for the question. The Integrated Command Center approach was, as you mentioned, led by Ottawa Police, and we had a very adept acting superintendent, Rob Bernier, at the head for us. And then we had additional commanders from the RCMP and the OPP. And I can tell you for a 24/7 basis, there were 3 during the daytime and 3 in the overnight hours, of which one of them was acting DC Paul Burnett. They made decisions collaboratively and made sure that all of the information was shared with each of their designated officers. So I mentioned before in a previous meeting about the level of gold, silver, bronze was the approach that we took. And so the communication and decisions that were made at the silver level, which is where the incident commanders were able to be communicated up and down and make sure that everybody was informed of the decisions and the reasons for them. And it worked tremendously well, as you saw during the operations on Actions On. Those teams were all in the same room, having real-time communication and able to get the intelligence they needed to take the actions that they did.
Thank you, Deputy Ferguson. And once again, I am placing on record, awesome job you all have done to save our city. So thanks once again. The final question I have with the CAO, Blair Bunker, in her report, she has recently said that the total cost to date is $31 million. I would like to know, what is the history of the reimbursement from the federal or provincial levels? Is 1 year, 10 years, 15 years? Because that is an important aspect on a budget going forward, because OPS is already having a budget crunch. So some enlightenment in that respect will be highly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So I wanted to mention that we have been working closely with the city and ensuring that we're sharing the costs as they come in so we can be planful together in seeking reimbursement from the provincial and federal governments. Historically, we've had a grant with the federal government. It's called the National Capital Extraordinary Police Costs Program. And we have a good history of working with the federal government to recover costs associated with events such as Canada Day and Canada 150. So I'm hopeful, and the discussions are already underway, and we have been sharing the costs with the federal government, that we will be able to seek full reimbursement through that grant line. So those conversations have started, right away when this event started in late January, and we continue to discuss the costs. So I'm optimistic that we will continue to have support in terms of getting those costs reimbursed.
Thank you. Just a brief follow-up on this. So the city manager has said that the city cost is 30 million, and now you are saying 31. So that is separate from the service cost, or is together?
I don't want to speak to the city costs necessarily, but I believe the city manager did say those were soft costs. And I think he may have been looking at the $800,000 a day initial policing cost estimate, and then making an estimate on city costs to come up with his costs. But the invoices come in daily, and we're still verifying costs. So most of the costs are around policing salaries from those 16 or so agencies that Deputy Chief Ferguson mentioned. So I just would, caution folks that we really need to continue to verify, but we are up to around 31 million for the policing costs, and the city costs will be on top of that.
And Mr. Chair, thank you for that, Blair. Mr. Chair, the one thing I would like to add to that is we do need to keep in mind, we're still in the middle of this operation. We've actively worked from day one to make sure we're accurately tracking all of our costs so that we can seek reimbursement from the federal and provincial government, but this is still ongoing. Blair and her team, along with OPP, RCMP counterparts, have been actively looking to build the financial cost of this to submit to federal and provincial governments, but we aren't there yet because this continues to be an active operation. We will report extensively on the financial costs of this to the board when they are known in reality.
Thank you, Chief. Would that be all?
Thank you, Chief, and CEO Bunker. Chair, yes, those are my questions. I have a brief comment on your motion, and
can we save that to the end about my motion, because I'm concerned of the time?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much. Madam Johnson, Member Johnson, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to add my thanks as well to the OPS and OPP and RCMP and all the services across Canada that were so helpful in ending this occupation in Ottawa. I have two questions. So during the 2022 protest and occupation in Ottawa, there was a 6-day blockade of the Ambassador Bridge, over which there is significant trade between Canada. And there was a high importance, and Ambassador David Cohen yesterday spoke to the importance of this integrated supply chain, which is powerful for jobs in both Canada and the US. So Interim Chief Bell, do you think this 6-day blockade impacted the initiation of the several phase response led by the OPS, RCMP, and OPP?
Sorry, I couldn't get off mute. Thanks. Sorry, I couldn't get off mute there. Thank you for the question. So what I can tell you is we worked exhaustively with the OPP and RCMP, because there was not just the blockade of the Ambassador Bridge. There was several demonstrations in Western Canada. There was in Winnipeg. There was border crossings that were impeded. There was occupations and demonstrations that occurred in Quebec City and Toronto. So this was a national event that we continued to work with our intelligence and policing partners on to watch and identify where we would use resources in order to be able to lawfully end each of them at the appropriate time. I think the other piece that's really important in that is the scope and scale of what occurred at the Ambassador Bridge wasn't nearly the scope and scale that occurred in the streets of Ottawa. We were by far the largest demonstration across the country. It took up the most area. It had the most equipment associated with it in terms of trucks and other vehicles and other things that were brought into the red zone. And it had the most complexity in demobilizing. Windsor was a big operation and had complexity of its own, but it was a municipal block that had a number of some trucks, but a much smaller number of trucks and some vehicles and considerably less people. So what I can say is that at every stage of the occupation, because there was an occupation, there was a blockade that started before Ottawa started. We have been engaged with our policing partners to look at how we appropriately deploy our resources to end them at the most appropriate time.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. And my second question is that community members have spoken to me, as well as I have seen comments on Twitter, that the BIPOC and the LGBTQ2 community believe that there is a double standard in police management of protests. And as we do this review and look forward, I think it's important to take this into consideration and take this feedback in some way so that we can ensure that there is no double standard in police public order duties. And I wondered if you had any comments or questions about this, Interim Chief Bell.
So thank you, Member Johnson, and I'm very happy you raised that, because we talk often about the really traumatic effect, absolutely traumatic effect that this demonstration has had on a geographical base within Ottawa. Through discussions, dialogue, I think the traumatic events that occurred affected much broader than just the people of Centertown, Market, Lower Town, Sandy Hill. I think there is people all across the city, from Carp to Cumberland, who feel the effects of having someone come in groups, not from Ottawa, come into our city and occupy our streets. I think that is likely most pronounced in our Indigenous, racialized, and faith-based groups. I've had many discussions and conversations with community leaders over the past number of days, including a meeting yesterday with our Community Equity Council to start to unpack exactly that. I spoke last week as we progressed through the demobilization of the demonstration about community healing and our commitment to community healing. There is the perception that there is a double standard by the police. That perception is reality within those communities, absolutely. And I think it's very important that we as a police service acknowledge that, and I do, and that we as a police service work very hard with those communities to understand what we need to do to repair that trust. So it is the area that I am most concerned about. It is one of the areas I am most focused on, and you have our absolute commitment that we will work with our communities to actually look at, examine, and try and answer those questions and rebuild that trust.
Okay, thank you. And I'm glad to hear that work has already begun. So those are my questions.
Thank you, Member Johnson. Member Valiquette.
Pour commencer, je tiens à remercier tous les policières et les policiers qui ont fait partie de votre équipe, Chef Bell. I would also like to recognize the fact that through these 16 agencies that worked with you, so many lessons have been learned in terms of tactics and equipment used. And I'm wondering in particular about the mounted unit. Is there in your mind a role for the mounted unit going forward with our own service?
Thank you for the question, Member Valiquette. Deputy Chief Ferguson is smiling because we've had many discussions about the mounted unit. The mounted unit and the use of a mounted unit within the Ottawa Police Service has been something that has been discussed and dialogued for a number of years. I would actively be interested to actively engage in that conversation within our community, within our police service, and with our board. What I can tell you is that mounted units are expensive, and that we need to actually identify a cost-benefit analysis of bringing them in to look at how we would utilize it best within our city. I know it was an extremely important part of this demonstration and needs to be part of what we include in our review to look at how it could be best utilized, if it should be utilized within the walls of our service. What I will say is I can't thank the Toronto Police Service and the other police services enough that provided us those assets, because they were very, very helpful in us maintaining control over the situation.
Merci beaucoup. C'est tout pour moi, Monsieur le Président.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Valiquette. Member Swaita.
Thank you, Chair. And I also want to take the opportunity to thank the Chief and the OPS and all the partners, partner agencies, to bring this situation to a conclusion. And for the sake of time, I will just ask my questions in a very brief format. Chief, are there currently other protests underway in other parts of Canada?
Yes, we continue to monitor protests through our intelligence groups and investigative groups at several different locations across the country.
Okay, and the question I might be asking might be more appropriate for our elected officials, but as a police service and not a police force, excuse me, other than enforcement, what can the police do to help address these unresolved underlying issues?
So I thank you for the question, Member Swade. I think you are accurate in identifying that that's a question that's better suited for our elected officials. We'll continue to engage with demonstrators and protesters to actively negotiate with them out of our streets. We will continue to actively enforce the laws and remove unlawful activities from our streets. In terms of the broader dialogue, I don't see that as a responsibility for the police to manage or further.
Okay, and I may have missed this earlier, but is the integrated command still in effect, or has that been unwound?
So I'll turn that over to Deputy Chief Ferguson.
It's still very much stood up, and it will be until the conclusion of when we see that the streets have returned to normalcy for us.
Okay, and do we have any criteria established on when those criteria will be met?
Yeah, I don't. I think it's going to be a collection of things. I think it's going to be the community's sort of feeling. It's going to be the intelligence that we have, which we continue to scan all sources for that, and any indications that the protesters have stood down. That will be, I think, when we are able to declare that we are returning to normal state.
Okay. And then, as you may know, Chief, there are similar protests beginning in the U.S. Is the OPS in communication with related authorities in the U.S.?
So we haven't been canvassed by our American partners yet, but we would absolutely be willing, able to provide lessons learned, to provide our perspective, whether it be through the Major City Chiefs or the International Association of Chiefs of Police, to provide anything that we've learned to help support them.
Okay, and then again, considering that underlying issues still haven't been resolved yet, how do you think the U.S. protest will affect Ottawa and possibly Canada?
So we'll continue to maintain intelligence. One of our intelligence partners is the CBSA, Canada Border Services Agency. So they will continue to provide information to us, as well as our American partners, to monitor and maintain a presence in the event that something were to come across the borders. And to add to Deputy Chief Ferguson's comments from before about the ICC, what I can tell you is we have absolute commitment from our partners that until there is no more threats to our community and until the situation is absolutely stabilized, they will not be leaving. So you will see RCMP, OPP, both from an integrated command perspective and from a deployment perspective in our streets and in our city supporting us until we're sure this is over.
Okay, and then finally, with that in mind, is that also going to be considered as part of the costs, the ongoing costs? And maybe to CEO Dunker, is that also going to be considered as something that we want to recoup from provincial and federal partners?
I think all I can say at this point is we will continue to track and verify all the costs, and if they are strictly associated with this, we will be asking for reimbursement.
Okay, thank you, Chief, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Deputy, you have your hands up. Do you have anything to add, Trish? Please.
Yes, thank you. I've just been made aware for you, Member Sueda, that our incident commander at the NCRCC did have some conversations with the Capitol Hill Police just last week. So there has been a reach out from them to our folks.
Thank you for the update.
Thank you. Thank you to my colleague. And so we have a list of councillors. So far, 8 councillors has agreed to join us. We're going to go in the order they came to us. We have Councillor Hubley, Curry, Kavanaugh, McKinney, King, Brockington, Deans, and Menard. And we're going to start with Councillor Hubley, as we said. And Councillor Hubley, and if you can ask all your questions, so this way we avoid the back and forth. If whatever question you have to the service, you can ask them and they can divide them among themselves who's going to answer your question. So Councillor Hubley, good morning.
Good morning, Chair El Shantiri, and thank you for the opportunity. I'll go right to my questions. I have to say that to witness the rollout of the Ottawa Police Service Plan on Friday and watch the various forces work in such an extremely well-coordinated manner to take back our city was great to see. But it also confirmed for me that the Ottawa Police Service was correct all along, that they did not have enough resources to handle a protest of the scale, and more resources were needed. Can you speak to this now? At what point did you realize that you needed the more resources and the number that you needed? Because publicly it was almost a 2-week mark before we started hearing that number 1,800. I'm trying to fill in the gaps of the first week and the week before this started. If you could address that, I'd appreciate it.
So thank you for the question, Councillor Hubley, and that is going to be a really important piece of the review and something that we will incorporate within the review. From the very early days of the demonstration, we began to work. OPP were integrated with us the second day, the Saturday that it started. So we did identify early on that we needed to partner with other agencies and to continue to increase our resource footprint. The dates and times of when that occurred will make a part of the review that we're going to engage in, so that we can really clearly identify what were the resource needs at the time, and how did we fill them, or how did we not ask for them early enough potentially. So we will continue to do that work as part of the review, but I can tell you we knew from very early on that we needed more resources, and our partners did come on an ongoing and increasing basis to help support us.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned that even with the end of the Emergency Act, that you're still able to keep the resources here for as long as you need them. I'm assuming that also would apply to tow trucks if they're needed back in. Is that correct?
Yep, that is correct. We haven't had issues relating to tow trucks as we moved into our operational phase.
Right, but this weekend may be a whole other story. So I wanted to make sure you had that available, because now that brings the question, did we really need the Emergency Act? Because if you've got the resources and you're allowed to keep them, and you've got the tow trucks and you're allowed to keep them, other than the financial resources that it gives us, did we need that act to be implemented?
So again, I think that will be part of the review, and I think that will actually be part of a federal level inquiry that'll be struck as a result of that legislation. I can let you know, like I've said before, the authorities that were provided to us under the Federal Act, the Provincial Act, and the Municipal State of Emergency were used, were leveraged, and were absolutely beneficial in ending the unlawful, the first phase of the unlawful demonstration, as well as allowing us to plan to keep our streets safe through this weekend and beyond.
Okay, thank you. And to Chair El Shantiri, I really like your motion that you put out today. As you know, myself and Councillor Tierney did a motion at council that was to try to get into a lot of the questions, but there was an overlap with police. So I'm happy you're doing this. I'm trusting that the report will be public as much as possible. I'm hoping, because one of the areas that we get a lot of questions on over the last week, and a lot of this came out of the last council meeting there too, was questions made by the former board and the direction provided to the police. Is that going to be part of this report, so that we know exactly what transpired there in many parts? I don't think you need me to get into it here, but if that's going to be part of it, in your answer, can you advise whether councillors can contribute questions to that report?
Absolutely, Councillor. And one of the main item here, board role and responsibility, that's also be looked at. So again, this motion is more about what happened at the OPS level, and the engagement, and then to work with your inquiries and other inquiries as well. But right now, we're just setting the term of reference, and I'm hoping we'll have clear direction by March meeting what exactly the term of reference is going to be, and to be included. So rest assured, we need to work together, and we put a time on it, so it will be 120 days maximum after the approval of this direction in March meeting. But thank you, Councillor Hubley, for your effort.
Well, I want to thank you too. It's very refreshing to hear your willingness to work with council on these issues, and to help our public get some answers that I think it's deserved, that our public knows what happens here. One last quick question. In the presentation, there was, I think it was Deputy Chief Burnett that referenced the number of hate crime charges. Could I get that number again? I missed it.
Is it okay if we email it to you, Councillor? We'll email you the whole presentation. Maybe the whole presentation.
I'll absolutely do that.
Okay. Sorry, we're talking over each other, but maybe Chief, your staff can forward the whole presentation to City Council. That's a great presentation, and we can all benefit from it.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hubley. Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the, sorry, I have my screen on the wrong screen. One of the questions I kept having throughout that process, and I mean, I could spend time thanking everyone here. I know that there's a ton of thanks to everybody. I just want to get to my question and not waste anybody's time. But I kept asking the question, and Councillor Hubley touched on it, that so much of the news I was receiving, I was getting from Twitter. And to me, as a city councillor, I mean, that was shocking to me. At one point, my daughter sent me a text saying, "Hey, Mom, did you hear this?" And I thought, this can't be how this is supposed to work. So I took a look at the bylaws, and I took a look at the board policy manual on governance and the reporting relationship. And as I said, Councillor Hubley, we didn't talk beforehand, but I think touched on this question. And I think that I guess I would want to comment that there, from somebody on, there was to be a governance review of the Ottawa Police Services Board for 2020. And there was to be a review of the board policy manual, I guess, and the governance and policy committee. And I'm just wondering if that took place, and if there was maybe not a clear understanding of the reporting relationship between the Ottawa Police Services Board and the municipal councillors and council as a whole.
Chair Al-Shanturi, would you like me to speak?
Go ahead, please. I was looking for the unmute button. Go ahead.
No problem. So the board did not do a governance review. What it typically does on an annual basis is an activity, training, and performance report, which is shared with City Council. That was meant to go to Council at the February meeting. However, that's just been delayed just because of the state of emergency, and it wasn't considered an urgent report, but that will be getting forwarded to Council. Every 4 years or so, the board typically undertakes an evaluation of its performance, usually with an external assistance, just to get a little bit more independent advice. So it will be up to this board to decide whether it wishes to do that within this work plan or the next. That'll be a board decision.
Okay, well, that's helpful because from what I saw, yeah, I understand there was a pandemic, but I just would point to that as something that maybe needs to be looked at very carefully. So that's good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curry and Councillor Kavanaugh. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair. Thanks to my thanks as well on how well this was done. No violence, no injuries. This is very, very important. It was done very deliberately, but not rushed, and I think that was really important. And I know you emphasized that, Chief, and it was followed through. And I think that's what people appreciated. The warnings, etc., the hand notices, that gave everybody time. So I think that was a great way to handle it. What I've heard from community members is concerns that this was not the case in the past in terms of comparisons of protests like Black Lives Matter, etc. And I think there needs to be a discussion with those communities and perhaps maybe a meeting on how to handle demonstrations, because protests are going to come back, the ones that we're used to. And I think this was exemplary, the way it was handled. And I wonder if we can have a discussion with communities of interest that we have seen that want to speak out and have, on process for protests. Obviously, it's not the ones we've experienced in the past don't last for days and days, but I think that there's a feeling that there was a double standard, and whether I think that has to be addressed. Are you willing to have some kind of meeting on these issues?
So thank you for your question, Councillor Kavanaugh. And as I indicated to Member Johnson, I'm not only willing, we've already started that process, and there's much work to do to engage all members of our community to have a discussion around how, as a police service, as a society, we want to manage protests in our city, because we are uniquely placed as the nation's capital, and how we make sure that we hear and understand the thoughts, feelings, and perceptions of different members of our community, particularly Indigenous, racialized, and faith-based communities, around how this demonstration was handled, and how they would understand us or believe us to have managed in the past demonstrations where their communities were involved in. It's a discussion that has to happen, and we are deeply committed to having it, to look at rebuilding that trust and engaging in the community healing that we know we need to.
Thank you. I appreciate that. In terms of what's happening now, you still have a perimeter set up. I'm just wondering if somebody walked up to Parliament Hill with a protest sign right now, would that be a problem? We've got situations happening in the Ukraine. We've got other items that are people are going to protest on that have nothing to do with what just happened. Will that be allowed?
So we're a police service who pride ourselves on supporting and allowing for lawful protest. So we will continue to allow for lawful protesting, and we will continue to not allow the unlawful protesting that we've seen over the past number of days occur in our streets.
Okay, thank you. In terms of intelligence gathering, what has changed? What are we going to be doing differently? Because that seems to be key in terms of not knowing what to expect. Are we having a bigger intelligence department? Are we putting more resources into it so that we know what's coming? Or are we working more closely with our partners? How is that going to be handled?
So that's all, and it's specifically identified within the review that we'll be part of. The gathering of intelligence, the dissemination of intelligence, the utilization of intelligence are all areas that we need to look at as it relates to this demonstration and occupation and any moving ahead. So it will be a major focus of our review efforts.
Okay, thank you. I just want to give a shout out to the tweets. They were very good. So they are useful, but I can see that we also have to make sure that everything gets out to Councillor, specifically to Councillor Curry's point. But the communications was very well set up. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh, and good morning, Councillor McKenney. You're next.
Thank you, Chair. I just want four things actually I want to raise. So just on the issue of increased costs with respect to protests, as you know, a motion was passed yesterday by City Council that would have us work with our federal partners and investigate how we would turn Wellington over to the authority of the federal government and hence the RCMP. So that would, in conjunction also with closing down Wellington to motor vehicles. So I just want to ensure that any consideration of increased budgets takes that into account, that as this moves forward and hopefully is successful, that we will not be necessarily on the hook for an increased cost to providing for policing for protests, given that we're the capital city. I don't know, that might be more of a comment, but I'll let you.
So thank you for that, Councillor McKenney. What I can say is, as Blair spoke about, we do actually have an extraordinary line item that comes to, that we receive $3 million from the federal government as it relates to policing the National Capital Region, being the police jurisdiction in Ottawa. This has exacerbated it. As you've seen, between ourselves and city costs to date, we're at $31 million. Those costs will continue to grow as the operation continues, but it is time for us to start to engage again in dialogues with the federal government to make sure that the city doesn't bear a burden for being the police jurisdiction in the nation's capital. We have had discussions about that previously, and we will continue to have those dialogues to help offset and sustain our budget.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And I just wanted to make sure that that was part of the consideration leading into not necessarily the cost for this, but ongoing policing costs. Just second, just more of a comment, really, the effect on Centretown residents, certainly, but in particular because it is a very diverse community. So there are BIPOC, Indigenous, queer communities really suffered, more than one traumas throughout this occupation. So I just want to establish that, I have been in constant conversation with public health, with our community health centers, with the organizations serving many of these sociodemographic communities, and what they really need right now is a response from public health and our community partners, more than they need a community meeting with me, with police. Like there's trauma. So I just want to point out that we can't supplant public delegations to the board with community meetings that target the people who were most affected by this illegal occupation. I just felt that just because of everything I'm hearing from them, I'm very sensitive to it. I know I've responded to Councillor or Board Chair El Shantiri, but I just wanted to put that on public record. Not that we can never have it, but right now, as I've said previously, I'm following, not leading. I'm listening to what people need, and I just want to ensure that that we're sensitive to the more of the mental health needs and the social needs of people in the downtown, especially those more often marginalized communities. Question: we've heard that members of OPP, Toronto Police, and our Ottawa Police Service have been identified as some members, a few, as donors to the organizations of this occupation. And that, of course, is highly, highly concerning. And this was done on or after February 5th. So once it had been established that this was an illegal occupation. So I'd just like to hear if the review that we're looking at, whatever form it takes, and that's my next question, will take into account these donors. And I think the public is demanding and deserves an explanation into what this means for the trust that is lost as a result with the community, and how we reestablish that, given this that certain members have donated to the organizers of this occupation.
So thank you for the question. What I can say is, and I'll start and end in the same place. I'm exceptionally proud to work with the vast majority of men and women who serve in police services across Canada, because I've seen their professionalism and dedication to community safety over the past number of weeks, particularly over the past week. As I indicated before, there has been some issues that have been identified and investigations that have been commenced into activities of certain people within our police service and other police services that will be continued and followed up as part of the review and outside of the review as discipline investigations. I'm on record, and I will say it again. If you helped support the illegal occupation, there is not room for you in this organization. This was something that caused deep community trauma, deep community concern, and questions of our ability to deliver policing services. So anyone that would have contributed to that hurt our mission and hurt us as servers to the public. So those reviews will continue. Those investigations will move on, but the vast majority of demonstrations we've seen over the past number of days, past number of weeks, are of exemplary professional policing service by hundreds and thousands of police members from across Canada. And for that, I'm exceptionally thankful and exceptionally proud.
Thank you, Chief Bell. I do agree that this type of behavior does damage the reputation, or does certainly have a negative impact on many who, of course, were not involved. But I think that it's just important to reiterate publicly that there will be a full review, and that it is something that we take seriously. So I appreciate that response. My last question is around the review and the motion that was walked on earlier in the meeting. As you know, I had put in an inquiry on February 7th, a special council meeting, and that was asking, what some of the options could be for a review. At that time, it was a review of the chief, who's Chief Slowey, who's no longer with police. However, the response back gave 4 options, and I have to say I'm concerned that the option in front of you today is probably the weakest of the 4 options to do a full review. And police, by extension, police services, and the how this was responded to. So I wonder if if I'm looking at the 4 options, and I don't know if everyone has that in front of them. Perhaps I will get Hannah to send you the response to the inquiry that I made. But certainly the most impactful would seem to be having the Police Services Board or Solicitor General request that the Ontario Civilian Police Commission conduct an investigation and report on the conduct, but also the approach that was taken to the occupation. So I don't have the opportunity, obviously. I'm not a member of the board, but I would ask the board to consider that the review that you're looking at is the weakest of the 4 options. And I think that at this point, we really should be looking at strengthening our review to ensure that going into the future, we never have anything like this happen in our city again. So I'll leave that, Chair. I'll listen to the discussion and consider how that might come about. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor McKenney. And again, we would like you to lead us for your community broad meeting, whether you need us, whether we can work with you with the public health, whatever we can do to start the healing in your community, you have our commitment. Thank you. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it brief because I know that we have others in front of us as well as limited time. So I'd like to ask the Chief, can you describe the resources that will be dedicated to ensure on a go-forward basis the police will continue to effect arrests that will lead to charges, prosecutions, convictions, and punishment for all those involved in illegal activity during these protests? We know that there was a challenge in terms of resources throughout this crisis, and obviously there would be a need for ensuring that we could have the proper resources to continue those investigations that you had outlined in your presentation at the beginning. So I was just wondering if you could describe whether the resources will be in place to be able to undertake those investigations.
Thank you for the question, Member King. I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Chief Ferguson, who will outline in broad strokes our investigative strategy moving ahead.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Member King. So one of the extensions of the offer of support and help from the RCMP and the OPP is just that. What resources do we need, do we require going forward to make sure that we are able to finish off all of these investigations appropriately? We have divided it up into 3 specific groups of investigations, and I won't get into the details of that, but just to say that there are specific skill sets that are going to be required for some of them that involve things like, cybercrime, social media, checks, and being able to capture that evidence that we require to be able to prove the elements of the offense. So all of those teams are being looked at right now in terms of what resources do we need, who will be assigned to them. And we have the commitment from the OPP and the RCMP, because some of them are very specific acts, and the Emergency Act is one of them. Looking at things like seizing funds, that type of stuff is not something obviously that we deal with on a very regular basis. So those specific skill sets have been asked for, and we have a commitment from our partners that we will be supported in being able to pursue these to the end of the investigative demonstration.
And what about finances? We know that you had said that the senior levels of government, the federal government, will pay for the resources regarding the actual operations during the crisis. What about on an ongoing basis? Has there been conversations with the senior levels about the ongoing investigations and whether those costs that could be considerable would be added to that bill?
Yeah, I suspect a similar type of documentation and tracking of those resources and requirements would be then presented as part of our request to the federal government. If that, if I see CAO Dunker nodding, I think that's the approach that we would take and be very clear in our tracking of those resources requirements.
No, I appreciate.
I'm sorry, member. Okay, what I would add to that is, through discussions with Commissioner Lucky and from the RCMP and Commissioner Creek from the OPP, they have an unwavering commitment to work with us till the absolute end of this, including any investigative and prosecution phase. So while we will track all of those costs and look for cost recovery around it, both of those organizations are in as partners for the long haul and will continue to work with us.
I appreciate that response and the response from the senior levels of government, because the expectation of residents, whether it takes months or whether it takes years, that people are brought to justice for their actions. My second question, last question, is my office continues to receive reports of harassing behavior. Just yesterday, I received personal messages about harassing behavior in front of one of the schools in my ward. So trucks parked and intimidating people, both children and parents at the school. So despite the fact that major operations might have been concluded, obviously there's still pockets of protesters. I'm wondering if you can describe the actions that are being undertaken to continue to protect school zones from protesters.
We continue to, the activity around schools was identified to us about a week and a half ago, and we continue to flag and investigate all complaints that we receive around intimidation or activities in and around school areas. We have to again ask our public to make sure that they report those incidents to the police so that we can have a coordinated and deliberate response, including criminal investigations in those instances, as well as flag and identify areas of concern so that we can have either members of our youth team or members of our frontline services do proactive engagements in those areas, which we know is so important. So again, I will ask, please make sure any of your constituents who are reporting to you have reported to us so we can initiate the processes we need to.
And we'll facilitate that today for certain. There were police on site during the incidents that we've been notified about, but we just wanted to really underline that there needs to be continuous vigilance, especially around school zones, as protesters have not completely left the city and are still working to intimidate people in school zones. So I appreciate the answers. Thank you, Chair.
Member Valaket, Chair El-Shantiri has asked that you take over his seat if you wouldn't mind, and Councillor Brockington will be next.
No problem at all, Krista. Please go ahead, Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Acting Chair. Good morning. Chief, are any members of the provincial parliament being investigated for encouraging people to swarm our 911 system, for encouraging people to storm Parliament Hill, and for encouraging people to disobey police orders?
So I can't provide specifics on ongoing active criminal investigations. If there were investigations, at the culmination of them, we would provide information if someone were charged as a result of that investigation. But again, I can't provide specifics on ongoing investigations.
is encouraging people to overwhelm the 911 system when there aren't emergencies against the law?
So we have initiated, we've received several complaints. We've received several pieces of information that identify direction to overwhelm our 911 system. And all the way through this, we've put out messaging to discourage it, and we've put out messaging to identify that we will treat those incidents seriously, and we will commence a criminal investigation into those.
Thank you. During that specific time, I was aware of at least 2 households in my ward that had medical emergencies and could not get through to 911. So I encourage you to investigate thoroughly in that regard. CPOs and the NRTs were redeployed from neighborhoods to augment the boots on the ground for the occupation, and that's understandable. There wasn't any heads up to counselors that this component of the OPS teams were leaving their communities. And I'm not aware whether the CPOs and the NRTs have been redeployed back into communities. Can you please comment on what the status of those 2 groups are?
So thank you. We've what I'll start by saying is there isn't an area of the Ottawa Police Service that hasn't been dramatically impacted from a service perspective as we've dealt over the last month with this occupation. So the need to redeploy resources from our youth team, from our neighborhood team, from our community police officers, from our homicide unit, from our sexual assault and child abuse unit. There isn't an area in the city that hasn't been, an area in the service that hasn't been touched by this. We are looking, we are still in the middle of an ongoing operation as we've laid out today, and we are looking to make efforts to resume regularized operations, which will include the return of neighborhood resource teams to their respective communities. It's the cornerstone of our service delivery model. So it is very important that we get those members back into their communities, get our frontline platoons filled, get our homicide detectives back to investigating homicides as quickly as we can. We will not be able to do that until this operation has concluded, and that has not yet occurred.
Okay, can you do some outreach with the impacted community, the counselors in these communities once these complements are back? There was really, and I understand, I get it that for an occupation like this, you have to prioritize your resources and you have to direct those where needed. I do understand that, Chief. But with we have some overnight crime sprees that are happening in this section of my ward. I had a town hall last week, received significant number of examples and issues, which I've shared with my CPO, but we don't have the NRT team right in the community to help out with this. And so there's a lot of questions within the community because these resources are gone. My final question, just to follow up on questions I asked at council, and many of board members and councillors have asked this today, and that is about the $31 million estimate so far in costs. I just want clarification on one minor question. For police costs incurred, is it up to the Ottawa Police Service or the City of Ottawa to advocate for the repayment of these costs through the provincial or federal governments? Who is speaking on behalf of all organizations who have incurred additional costs? Is it the City of Ottawa on behalf of the Ottawa Police Service, or is the Ottawa Police Service, in addition to the City of Ottawa, asking upper levels of government to refund costs incurred?
Sorry, I didn't get my mute off. So what I can tell you is the level of cooperation between the police service and the city as we've gone through this has been amazing. So I would say it isn't one or the other, it's all of us. And we've had ongoing regular conversations with both General Manager Steve Kanalakis as well as CFO Wendy Stephenson around exactly that. We'll continue to work together. We will continue to advocate to make sure that our collective budgets are made whole and that we receive proper funding for this.
Very well. I appreciate that. And thank you for the briefing today.
Thank
Cheryl
you.
Shantiri, sorry,
yes.
Cheryl Shantiri, I'll just remind you, I think I have 10 minutes. I can do 10 minutes and then I do need to leave for that meeting.
And I think we only have 2 more councillors to my knowledge, or maybe 3. So we have Councillor Deans, Menard, and I'm not sure if somebody else on my list, only 2, unless we have an updated list. So go ahead, Councillor Menard, please. And the chief by 11 o'clock will release you.
Okay, thank you very much. Chair, I do need to start by just saying that I am disappointed in the board and chair's decision to not allow the public to participate in this meeting. And my comments will mostly be focused around that and other actions I'm hoping the board will take. I just was hoping to get a delegate count of how many people had actually signed up for just 4 days from now on the 28th. Can someone just let me know how many delegates we had signed up for then?
Executive Director, Krista.
I will ask Hannah to send that. I don't have the final count. She was managing the delegations.
Councillor, the delegation sign up for a special agenda, and we have no agenda for the 28th. Staff didn't have time to do the agenda. So the people sign up to speak, they can speak in a later date. But right now we have no agenda for the 28th. The same people involved with the unlawful protest, they are the one who's going to bring those items to council to the board on the 28th. So I said it in my statement earlier today, Councillor. We will be working with these folks. We might don't even have to wait till the end of March, but once we be able to have the agenda and the people who signed up for those agenda items, we'll reach back to them and invite them back to speak to us. We're not avoidant, Councillor, but we just don't have item for the 28th meeting.
I understand many people. No, I appreciate your view of it. I understand many people signed up during the 24, 25 days of the occupation. And this is the public's board. The public pays for this board. And I find the reasons provided for barring the public at this time were inadequate. The main reason that was being given was that board members were new. And as far as I can tell, only Councillor Leeper has not served on this board previously, and he is an experienced city council member. The way members were recently appointed, which was through, of course, the removal of the chair and several resignations as a result, was ostensibly because trust was lost in the old board. And yet at the same time, we're communicating that there's not enough experience for the new board to receive delegations. And so I don't think it's an adequate or credible reason with respect. I think it's further called into question by the motion that's being proposed today, which is a walk-on. And I'd urge board members to really consider that. That should have crucial public input. The board should consider it in the future and not, rush to approve something today that currently doesn't have the requests for within the Police Services Act. The OCPC, the Ontario Civilian Police Commission, which we heard from our clerk is important as a potential important investigative function. And that's not being considered in this motion today. I hope that does change today. I think there's deep questions right now that the public has, and they really should have been heard today. I'll make a couple of comments. I do have to go to planning committee at 11. And so I think I've made my point about the public being included. When the first 22 days, I need to go back because we saw very little enforcement during that time. And there was big concerns, and I'm talking about just basic enforcement of areas in the residential area in particular, where we were just seeing, complete abuse of bylaws and laws. And it was in pockets. I wasn't expecting mass arrests to occur, but just basic discussion about enforcement. So I just to be clear, if we can be as clear as possible, was there direction from the executive team or not to enforce those basic laws during those first 3 weeks?
So thank you, Councillor Menard. As I indicated, all of these components will be part of the review that is being talked about and will be undertaken by the Ottawa Police Services Board.
Okay, because that's the main question right now for people is why was nothing done during that time, right? Is that's the question on everybody's mind, and then also some of the complicity that we saw, unfortunately, in many instances that is now coming out. And so those two big questions remain. I do hope the board and chair, again, with all respect and respect to this new board, I do hope you do consider the Ontario Civilian Police Commission to be part of this. That is extremely important at this time. They have the ability to investigate. Their quasi-judicial body, and that is their function. They investigate these sorts of things. A simple review as being proposed today by somebody hired by the board is with all respect, not enough, given what has happened in our city, the biggest policing crisis, I think, in our city that we've seen. So I just urge you all to take greater action in this, and appreciate the time today. Thanks very much, Chair.
And thank you, Councilor Menard. But if I just can make a quick comment, you mentioned most of the people sign up to speak is about the unlawful protest. Well, we're still in the middle of it, Councillor, and our members are still fully engaged in that. So it's not over yet, so to speak. But thank you for your comment. And my motion also is not a walk-on. This to give direction to the executive director to work with the procurement and come back to us in March to debate it or amend it or add to it. So it's not a final, but just to get the process in place. But thank you for taking your time coming with us. I know we have Councillor Eglai. I'm not sure if anybody else is still before Planning Committee at 11. Is anybody else, Krista, beside Councillor Eglai? Councillor Eglai, please go ahead.
I'll keep it.
Will be next. Sorry.
Sorry, I'll keep it very, very brief. I really only have one question, and it's around the review. And I'm not sure if it's yours to answer, Chair, or Chief Bell's. And I don't expect a specific answer to practice or strategy today. But what I do want to confirm is the single biggest question that my residents have asked about the police response is, and I asked it to the former chief a number of weeks ago, is how did the trucks get into the downtown core in the first place? Why were roadblocks and blockades set up in the first place, as we've now seen being so effective over the last number of days? And again, Chief, I don't expect an answer today, but the comment that I want to make, Chief and Chair, is that can I get some assurance that that is one of the questions that the review is absolutely going to consider? The former chief said he had somehow had legal advice that he couldn't do that. I think that's a question that has to be looked at, and we need to understand why it didn't happen, if it should have happened, if it could have happened, and what might have, what we might have seen in the weeks following that decision not to do it, how that might have been different. So I just want some confirmation that that question issue will be looked at. As I say, that's the single biggest question I've received from residents about how this unrolled, is why that wasn't in place in the first place.
Councillor Eglai, I can absolutely confirm that that will be a major crux of the review in terms of how this demonstration unfolded and how future demonstrations involving vehicles unfold.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have nothing further, Mr. Chair, and I'll let you get back to the meeting. Thanks so much for letting me ask the question.
Thank you very much, Councillor Eglai. Krista, did you say somebody else is still on waiting?
Yes, Councillor Kitts.
Go ahead, let them in, please.
And Chair, this will be the last question I'll be able
Yes,
to
yes,
take.
sir.
And then
we-
myself and my team will have to go.
Okay, so, okay, Councillor Kitts, good morning.
Good morning. Really briefly, and Chief Bell, I don't necessarily think you need to be on for this. If you need to go, that's fine. The board and my colleagues have already asked a lot of important questions, but there was a sharp shift in the way OPS was communicating with the public through social media once the operation was underway. It was excellent, in my opinion. It was informative. It was combating misinformation in real time. Et c'était bilingue, qui est très important pour plusieurs de nos résidents de notre ville. And in addition, council did begin to receive helpful updates directly from the chief. So we weren't relying solely on information from Twitter as we had been earlier in the occupation. So I know you mentioned in the presentation that comms were integrated into the command unit, and appreciating that the situation over the weekend was obviously unique. I'm wondering if you have plans to leverage that expertise going forward for either future events, but even everyday communications, because it was one of the many truly commendable components of the operation. And I very much think there's a place for strong communication from OPS going forward.
The simple answer to that is yes. We through past inquiries, inquests and reviews around demonstrations, failings and falterings of communications, particularly during the operational phase, was something that led to poorer outcomes and poorer perceptions. We actively embedded communications specialists within the command team to make sure that we could counter false narratives, we could correct records, and we could provide relevant, timely information. My opinion is it was extremely successful. The people that were managing that did an exceptionally good job and helped us see the successful end to the occupation that we did.
I completely agree. Happy to hear that. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kitts. So with that, I believe there's no one in the waiting. Chief, you're free to go. Thank you very much. I apologize for extending your stay with us. I know you had a meeting at 10:30. Deputies and director, do we still call it Director General, Madam Duncan, or
Just CAO, Chair.
CAO, sorry.
Or you can call me whatever you want.
So the CEO will stay with us, and I believe we want to go back about my motion. I think there was misunderstanding, but let me read at the end what I am asking. Be it further resolved that the executive director bring forward a report to the board for approval of the independent review and framework of the review, including cooperation with other ongoing review to the March meeting of the board, and that the review be complete no later than 120 days after the approval of this contract. So basically, folks, today you're not improving the direction, you're just giving direction to the executive director to work with the city procurement to be able to find someone or independent from the service to do the after action report. That's what we're asking here for. So again, I hope I heard my colleague earlier, he has some friendly amendment. I'm not sure if you still wish to, but Jeff, you had your hand up before, and just be careful with the timing of the plan committee. I think they're gonna start shortly, so.
No, I understand. This is obviously important, though, and I apologize for taking a bit more time. I've heard Councillor McKenney and Menard with respect to the importance of reviewing what has happened. And I've got three things that I'd like to address in this closing. The first is I want to make sure that if your motion today for to begin the procurement of a review passes, that it contains a couple of key pieces as a friendly amendment. So I would ask you, Chair, whether you'd be willing to amend your motion such such that the, I'll call them terms of reference, include whether systemic issues within the OPS, such as racism or anti-vaccination sentiment, compromised the OPS response, and how the OPS response to this crisis compares to response to other demonstrations in recent years.
Member Leeper, as you know, we don't have legal with us today. I will accept them as a friendly amendment. Once we start the discussion with the procurement in the city, we obviously will include legal, and hopefully we can absolutely, if it's no issue from legal perspective, we can include them in the term of reference. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So that if your motion does pass today, then I'm reassured that that will at least be in there. I am sympathetic to the arguments made by Councillor Menard that even talking about the review should probably have included some public input and delegations. And I would just wonder, is there any reason why that couldn't be done at the regular meeting on March 28th?
I don't see why not, because by that time we have and if we can present it finally with legal approval and procurement, and then we can present it. And if something needs to be added where we can live with, remember, it's going to be many other inquiries. This is just for the after action report. We need to know what happened. So many people ask you why we didn't move for so many days, why we didn't do this in so many days. We need that, and that's police internal. It's not rocket science. We need that, and that will be whatever we do is going to be incorporated with other inquiries. And
forgive me, I may not have made myself entirely clear. Is there any reason why your motion to begin the procurement process couldn't begin at our March 28th meeting rather than today?
Well, right now, we're just going to ask the procurement to take a look and help us, to find somebody, because we want it within 120 days after March meeting. But in March meeting, we can, before we vote on it, if somebody want to speak about it, they're welcome to speak about it.
And I do take at face value that the terms of reference that are proposed will be the subject of public delegation. So I do appreciate that. And then finally, Chair, I do have a motion that I would like to raise in response to Councillor McKenney's intervention, which is
Sorry, Jeff, before we go to your motion, can we carry that direction to allow the executive director to start the process with the city procurement office?
No, Chair, I have a questions too on your motion, please.
On my motion, okay, so go ahead. Let's finish one motion before we introduce the second motion, so we don't get mixed up with the two.
So is Councillor Leeper over? I think he's still discussing that.
Yeah, I do have another motion that I think relates to it, and I think it's my prerogative at this point to put that on the table, just so that members are aware that I've got it in front. So, Chair, I would like to move that in response to Councillor McKenney's intervention, whereas the police response to the occupation crisis has shaken public confidence in both the Ottawa Police Services Board and Ottawa Police Service, and whereas the residents of Ottawa have raised concerns in various forums about the independence of the Ottawa Police Services Board from the Ottawa Police Service and are seeking an independent review of the service's actions to answer questions about the operational decisions made during the crisis and the relationship of those to systemic issues within the OPS. Therefore, be it resolved that the Ottawa Police Services Board requests that the Ontario Civilian Police Commission investigate, using its powers under Section 25 of the Police Services Act, the Ottawa Police Services senior leadership team's response to the occupation to determine whether systemic issues within the service compromise that response and whether the response was as effective as possible. And I'll conclude there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Leeper. Can I just ask you from a legal perspective, and again, we don't have legal today, we are calling this unlawful protest. Can we change the wording? Because we are the oversight body. I'm not sure if we are in a position to call occupation crisis or other, if we can just call it the unlawful protest, because that's, because we are the oversight. You can't be oversight and already taking position on. Will that be accepted by you?
Yeah, I'm not going to be dogmatic on that. Thank you, Chair.
And I'm okay. Anybody else about Councillor Leeper? Councillor Leeper, are you staying with us, or do you have to go?
No, I'm staying. Yep.
Okay, that's fine then. Okay, can we? Okay, so now we have Councillor Leeper's member Leeper. My policy motion on the floor as well. So if you want to speak about both motions or one at a time, I'm okay. And I did accept his friendly amendment earlier, so his friendly amendment will be incorporated with my motion. Member on the list, we have Swaita and then Norman. Member Swaita, please.
Thank you, Chair. Also, I just want to build on something that Member Leeper mentioned with regards to having public input into the process. And I think it's very important. And I just wanted to ensure that your motion, Chair, incorporates the ability for the board and public delegates to frame the review before we ask a particular vendor to proceed. Do we have ability to frame it in a way, or to make sure that certain things are included?
Yes, I believe, yes.
So right now we're just talking about giving direction to our executive director to source out potential vendors, but the framing of what they're going to do, the board and the public will have input into that. Well, right now, I present my motion with some of those ideas. And now Councillor Member Leeper add a couple to it, and we said that's friendly amendment, and we're going to present it at the board in March. Now, if the public wants to speak about it and add a clause or two, that's fine. But again, it's going to be so many inquiries, and this one, the intention was to get the after action report quickly. So I'm not sure if we're going to add a lot more to it, how much is going to be interfering with others. Yeah.
So, but I mean, I take your point, and we're not deciding today. We just decide on a framework today. If this is something we agree on, well, let's get the ball rolling. That's what I'm trying to do.
Okay, and actually that brings me to my next point about Member Leeper's motion, that it's safe to assume that there's going to be many other investigations and inquiries by different bodies. And I'm wondering if we can move Member Leeper's motion to the March 28th meeting.
I'm not, again, in the absence of legal, I don't want to speak out of turn, but no one can investigate a current member, whether police chief, deputy police member, other than OCPC. No other inquiry would be able to. What Councillor Member Leeper asking for is asking for the Ontario Civilian Police Commission to investigate the use of its power under side. So basically, it's up to them. They might say we take it, might say no, we don't take it. But he is asked or requesting, but their investigation will be totally separate from any other inquiry. We're not investigating, we're inquiring. Tell us, Chief, what happened. Tell us, Service, what took place. Have an independent come in and review the action was taken. So that's two different things, honestly.
Thank you for the clarification, Chair.
And again, I hope I'm not speaking, I'm just speaking from my experience, because I know OCPC don't take direction from the board. We request from them, and it's up to them if they accept or not. Member Leeper, your hand's still up. Is it for just, okay. Member Norman, please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair. So two things. I'll first speak to your motion, and what I understand, and it is fairly known that there would be many investigations and possibly a public inquiry to be headed by a judge who will be going into all the details of this occupation, including the role on the service, the board, other stakeholders. Do you still feel this exercise by bringing your motion is not a duplication in any way?
Member Norman, no. My after action report is to give what we just heard from ourselves, like many questions from the board members and from council, and I would imagine from the public as well. They would like to know what happened. what happened in those many days before the action decided to take place. What was the delay? Why we didn't do this? Why we allowed it? All these will come in this inquiry, and that will be incorporated to any future inquiry. As you heard me say to Councillor Rubley earlier, that will be incorporated to his inquiry as well. This is just about the police operation, not about public perception. It's just we want to know what happened there.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I have two friendly amendments, if you would agree to that. The first is the communications which you have proposed. I would like it to be added as internal and external communications.
Okay. So we have communication. You like to add the word internal and external.
And external communications, yes.
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
And the second friendly amendment, you have added board role and responsibilities.
Yes.
We are all aware under the Police Services Act and our lawyers and our bylaws that what are those. But my friendly suggestion to you would be the board role and responsibilities to handle major events and crisis management.
Okay, still within this same thing, role and responsibility. Okay, that's fine.
Thank you, Chair. And now coming to the second motion which Councillor Leeper has brought. Definitely, it is a direction to the OCPC, and as you have stated, that it goes to the OCPC, then they decide on that. I am fine with that. I am fine with that. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Norman. And please, for clarity, we're not directing OCPC. We're just requesting from them to investigate. And they're the only people, again, they can investigate current member. The minute the member is no longer member of the police service, OCPC has no jurisdiction. So let's keep that in mind. They're the one tell us what to do. We don't tell them what to do, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Member Velikat, please.
Yes, very quickly, Chair. I just wanted to thank you for bringing this motion forward. I think it will help in the healing process. It's a good public engagement exercise, and because it will be presented in March, the public will have an opportunity to provide us with further input, and I think it'll make it even stronger. So I just wanted to tell you that thank you very much for bringing this forward. This is something that we definitely need to do, and as a board, we need to take responsibility and get this done. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Velikat. And I see no more hands except the hands still left there behind. So we'll go in the reverse order. The first will go with the Councillor Leeper's motion, and I'm sure Jeff, the Executive Director will frame it in a way to send it and share it with legal, if you don't mind, to make sure we are on all in the same page, and we'll request it to OCPC. You're okay with that?
Yes.
Are we all in agreement?
Yes.
Agree.
Thank you. And my motion as amended by Member Norman and Member Leeper, are we in support of the motion to give direction to the PD? Okay, thank you very much, folks. So I believe that will be our conclusion of the meeting, so that the Ottawa Police Service Board received this item for information. Obviously, the presentation from the chief and his colleague, both deputies, also with those motions. So receive and carry on the motion. Is that correct?
Adopté. Yes.
Merci. Madam Executive Director, did we miss anything?
Nope, you've covered everything on the agenda.
Okay, so folks, again, I would like to thank you again for giving us some time this morning. Madam Dunker, I just want you to know, also the board is the one responsible for your budget. You are responsible for spending it. We, the board, responsible to provide it to you. So we will be working with you, with the city of Ottawa, with all our partners. I'm the one who negotiated the $3 million. I think Suzanne would remember that back in the days. And hopefully we can help you to fully recover all the costs we incurred during this unlawful demonstration protest. So again, thanks to all of you, and looking forward to continue working together. Acting Deputy Burnett, welcome to the new position, and Acting Deputy Trish Ferguson, thank you so much, both of you and all the members, for your hard work. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bon
Chair.
travail.
Thank you. So motion to adjourn, moved by Jeff Leeper, and we're thank you very much, folks. We're adjourned. Take care.
Bye-bye, everyone.